Long time no see, sir.
Indeed. So it's the Secure Growth, Govern, Senior Leaders, Staff Meeting, and we'll get started in just a minute. I got told I forget to announce what this meeting is when we get started, so now I've announced it. Hey, Phil. Hey, Nate.
Hey, Wayne, Thomas, Nate.
Brilliant. So we'll get started with the Sec Growth Senior Leaders Development Staff Meeting for November 2nd. Phil, it looks like you've got the first item.
Yeah, in our expansion development meeting, Bartek was asking about having a published roadmap for each of our groups. We talked through several options, and so Bartek is quite keen on us continuing with having the priorities YAML files publish a roadmap on the group direction pages, which I've put the link to the YAML files in there and an example of one of them in the agenda. Just related to this, though, something we've recently implemented in Govern, and Nate has a project that sort of automates the creation of an MR to update the priorities YAML based on epics. Nate, since you're here, can you briefly talk us through the project that you've created?
Yeah, sure thing. It might be easier if I share my screen and just walk through some of the things really quickly. There's a quick demo. So this is the project here. It has 4 functions involved in it, but I think the first thing is just to go through the YAML file itself. So this is the YAML file, and we have a bunch of different variables in here. I don't know if you can see that very well, but we've got name, URL, DRI, target release, status, progress, milestone goal, and priority. The ones that are automated are priority, name, and URL. The rest are manually edited through the MR. So what happens is there is a scheduled function. You have to set up a whole bunch of variables for CI variables for it. And then we've got these 4 scheduled functions. 2 of them are set to run whenever we want. I run it weekly. So this then looks up all of the epics with the group label that we've set in the CI/CD variables, gets all of the ones with direction labels, and then updates the list based on priorities and puts them into order. The weekly updates clears out the weekly progress update here. And then what I do is I manually re-enter what the progress is doing based off that, and then run the second function, which is the get the update. And then this generates an update like this into an issue that you've created. So I put it into our planning issue. So each week we have this automated to put in here, which we then move over to the weekly Govern updates. That's a very quick run through, but yeah, any questions?
Yeah, I do have one, Nate. So does this generate the MR to update the priorities YAML, or does it just generate the table that you can use here?
Yes, so it also generates the MR YAML. So I've actually got one that, because I run it it automatically runs on a Thursday night. So it generated this weekly update for the first pings. Myself and the product manager will, as I mentioned, remove all the progress updates. You can see that it's automatically updated the name of this one based on the changing of the name of the epic. Yes, and this epic was closed, so it has removed it from the top YAML. Sorry, if I go back to the YAML file, we've got the priorities list, and then down the bottom, it automatically adds them to closed when they're closed and puts them down here. So we have like a list of previously closed epics. So this has removed it from the top and moved it down here and just added the status closed to it automatically.
Right, so having that set up to run every week, it's assigned to yourself and product manager, it's just a check-in. If something goes horribly wrong with the epics, if we remove the direction label from everything, nothing gets updated on the roadmap. So there's a manual step that yourself and the product manager would go through before publishing any changes. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. We wanted to make sure that we have that check and balance to make sure that we're not just automating it completely without any oversight. Just because the priorities pages are public, so we want to make sure that it's all correct, I guess, in that sense.
Right. And of course, the generated email reminds you to update the priorities, so things don't go stale on that roadmap list. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate.
Cool.
Yay for automation. Whether it's automated or not, should these primarily come from updates from engineering or from product management?
So my perspective is the priorities are set by the product manager, and then the automation then puts them into that list, which we then as engineering take and use to help with the planning. So this then helps us with planning as well. But keen to hear how others do this relationship as well with product.
The other approach we've tried is, and it's still up on the direction pages, is directly publishing the epic list. So any epic with your group label and the direction label and the fixed or inherited due date for that epic gets published, and we publish it in the milestone we expect it to be released. The problem with that approach is particularly around the inherited due date. If you add a new issue under the epic and you give it a future due date or milestone, it will then move something. We've said we're going to release it in 16.7. Suddenly we're releasing it in 16.9. And we've had customers come back to us and say, hey, you've changed your roadmap. You told us you were going to deliver this thing, and now you're not going to. I think this approach, which our product team supports, is great because of that manual step. But yourself as the engineering manager and product manager are verifying the changes before you end up publishing them. It'll catch, I'll call them mistakes, but it's very easy to update an epic by removing labels, adding labels, changing due dates. And this manual step is really good, in my opinion. Any other questions on that? Should we move on?
Move on.
Wayne, you're next.
Thanks, Phil. I am a little disappointed that we've seen not one, but 0 volunteers to do social activities, games and etc. during our Team Days event in a little over a week. I voluntold myself to do one, if that's a thing. Perhaps the way I asked everybody to volunteer was ineffective, and attracting folks to volunteer, that's likely possible, or likely the case. So I'd like to suspend, over the 3 days, 4 hours total, doing fun stuff to get to know each other better and, build relationships, etc. So can you reiterate to your teams, managers and ICs, it doesn't need to be managers doing this, to encourage them to volunteer? And I came up with an initial list of ideas, some that I've seen work well in the past, some from the gaming Slack channel, with some ideas that, so we have multiple people, basically somebody volunteers, they choose when, as long as the time's not already taken, they choose what, and then I'll get it on the schedule and they organize it. And it can be just for half an hour.
Look, I think focus has been elsewhere. It's end of quarter. There's OKRs, there's talent assessment. There's some projects being completed. Sharing with our teams again should help. I've shared in our Slack channels. We've already got one volunteer. So Gail and Paige are going to host a GeoGuessr session. I think we can get to 4 hours worth of team building activities fairly easily over the next 3 or 4 days.
It's great. We got Gail and Paige are both in PM. Does that remember correctly?
Product managers for growth. Yes.
And we even got people from outside engineering to volunteer to do some of these. And GeoGuessr's a lot of fun. I'm not very good at it, but it's very enjoyable. There's actually like a competition, like a international competition of who's the best GeoGuessr. I watched a little. It's amazing how good they are. Not that any of us are going to be that good. I think it's a good step. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
I'm agreeing that focus has been elsewhere. Talent assessments are top of mind, particularly in groups that have manager changes. I'm seeing a lot of activity and focus there. I'll happily publicize again early next week.
Thanks. It doesn't need to be managers.
Yeah.
It actually, maybe in some ways, actually not in some ways, it'd be great if it was a mixture of managers and engineers, or fewer managers and more engineers. They don't get nearly as much opportunities to do things in front of large groups, and some really don't want to do that, and that's totally fine, and some probably do and just don't have the opportunity to. So good stuff. Thank you. We've got a little more than a week to get it all coordinated. I just got a little concerned when we had no volunteers other than me. So, but it sounds like we're in good shape. So thank you. So, are you all on track for the upcoming due dates for calibration and related? So for me, I barely started myself, which makes me anxious, but I can't say I'm not on track. It's been priority 3 of my priorities for a couple days now to get ahead of this, and it's never made it to number 1, although I was out sick one of those days. So, but I think I'm on track, but I'm anxious about it. So how are you? How's everybody else looking?
More than cautiously optimistic, best I can tell, on track. That I need to see a little bit more come together before I can say that with absolute confidence, but I'm not worried at this point.
Always feels like there's a huge amount to do around talent assessment, and I just keep reminding myself that it's one step at a time. We've done self-evaluations. Now we're up to manager evaluations. Then we'll have calibration, multiple levels of calibration. And on that note, the calibration sessions, they're on the calendar. So I think we're on track. I'm hearing good reports from engineering managers as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anything else we want to discuss before we go to confidential items?
Adil, was there anything you wanted to verbalize?
No, I was just gonna, I'm going through for myself, and I'm going through slowly through them. It's probably not the best time because we have few final reviews for our GCP project, realignments, milestone release changes. So I feel like next 2 weeks are going to be fun.
We're trying to do some of the, a lot of the team day async in addition to sync. So it's people producing videos and then reviewing them in advance, and then coming to meetings either sync or async with questions or comments if they have them, so people can plan their time. And at least one of the fun activities can be done primarily async. It's hard to have fun and collaborate, get to know people async, but the one I'm doing is everybody can do async. So, it's based on the time and interest people have, of course. Let's try to make the time. That being said, I know there's all these other things going on, but we have to have the relationships too. And which reminds me is on those 3 days, as the schedule solidifies, cancel one-on-ones or move them, team meetings, like other meetings that you can move out of those days. If you can do so, and not specific to you, Adil, but for everybody, that would help to make time for these things. That's also why it's not a full 3 days, during everybody's work hours. We're going to spread it out at different things that are at different time zones for different geographic regions. And we don't have, we might have 3 or 4 hours of activities spread throughout each day. And knowing that nobody's going to come to all of them because of interest and or geographic region. So it's going to be spread out a good bit as well to make sure we're keeping time for other things. But great context, Adil. I really appreciate it. All right. Nate and Adele, if you could drop, we got a couple confidential topics, and then